You ever just think of yourself as an ordinary person with a lot of weaknesses? Something that's maybe not great at a lot of things. I can relate to this. Maybe you look at people around you and you see how great they are at various things and you're like, why am I not great at that? I would love to be better at that. And when we recognize these weaknesses, what ends up happening is insecurities form because of them. And once the insecurities form, it builds up to a point where we would like to do something about it. So we take things into our own hand and we try to get better at these weaknesses, and we try to strengthen them. But what if we're supposed to embrace the weakness? That sounds ridiculous, right? What if the weakness was there for somebody else to work through? What if that weakness was there for God to work through? Isn't that what we're studying all through the book of Judges? Flawed heroes, all these guys, these ordinary men and women that God chose to use in mighty ways. That's what our theme verse says. It says, instead, God chose things the world considers foolish in order to shame those who think they are wise. And he chose the things that are powerless to shame those who are powerful. He chose ordinary people just like you and me. And that couldn't be any more true than the judge that we're about to talk about today. His name's Shamgar. There's not a whole lot that's said about this guy. There's only one verse, actually. And this was just an ordinary guy. He was a farmer. This is what the verse says. It says, after Ehud, Shamgar, the son of Anath, rescued Israel. He once killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad. See, what's crazy about that is this guy is just a farmer. And what he ended up killing 600 Philistines with was just an ox goad, a long stick with this pointy prick on the end of it. And then there was a spade at the other end. What it was used to do is a farmer would poke the ox in front of him as he was plowing the ground, so that way the ox would continue on. And then when the plow would fill up with soil and earth, they would use the spade at the other end to clear the earth from it. Well, what makes this story so crazy is the Philistines, they were mighty warriors and they had lots of crazy weaponry. They were blacksmiths and they had iron. And the Israelites, they didn't have any of this stuff. And a lot of the time when they were pulled into slavery, all of these weapons were taken away from them. So here's just a farmer that God chooses to raise up and use an ox goad, a simple, ordinary weapon, not even a weapon, a tool, to kill 600 Philistines with. I think Shamgar would have recognized that he had a weakness and that he was just an ordinary man, and he knew that it was God being magnified, and it was God's power that was working through him. And that's what God does through this whole book of Judges. He uses these ordinary people to do magnificent things through them. He works through people's weaknesses. See, Paul recognized this. Paul was a man that, we know as like a powerhouse in the Bible, like somebody that wrote most of the New Testament. He did all of these crazy things for the Lord. And we would think that he was just very gifted in every which way. But he knew that he had weaknesses. And he said something interesting about him. It says in 2 Corinthians 11, or 12:9, each time he said, so Paul had a weakness. Each time he said, my grace is all you need. This is God responding to his weakness that he had because Paul wanted it removed. God said, my power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults, the hardships, the persecutions, and the trouble I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, I am strong. So what if these weaknesses that we have, what if we embraced them? What if we recognize that they're weak and we allowed God to work through them? Because a couple things end up happening with these weaknesses. One, when we understand we're weak, we have to rely on God to work through those weaknesses, which means we have to trust in him. It's the opposite of pride. It's humility. It's embracing and boasting in the weakness so God can work through them. And when God works through them, he's going to grow you to be more like himself. And then he's also going to magnify himself so others around you can see that they know that you're weak in this area. And they can see that it's obviously God that's working through you. And it's going to point others around you to him. So what insecurities do you have? Are you trying to grab onto those weaknesses? What if you allowed God to work through them? You see, in our groups, that's what we're going to be talking about today. I love this verse. It's in 1 Corinthians. It's in 1 Corinthians 4:7. It says, we now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God and not from ourselves. embrace the weakness and allow God to work through them. I can't wait to hear how it goes.